You know what I've noticed? Most people are living lives of quiet mediocrity, and they've convinced themselves it's not their fault. They blame the economy, they blame their boss, they blame their circumstances, they blame everything except the person they see in the mirror every morning. But here's what I want you to understand right from the start. Mediocrity is not something that happens to you. Mediocrity is a choice. It's a decision you make every single day by the small things you do, and more importantly, by the things you don't do. Let me tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. The reason most people never become the best at anything isn't because they lack talent. It isn't because they don't have opportunities. It's because they've never really decided what being the best actually means. They're chasing a fantasy, not a philosophy. They see someone successful and they think, I want that, but they never stop to ask themselves what that really cost. They see the harvest, but they never think about the planting, the watering, the weeding, the waiting. I remember when I was 25 years old, working behind the counter, barely making enough to pay my bills, and I thought I was working hard. I really did. I'd come home exhausted every night, convinced that I was doing everything I could. But you know what I was really doing? I was confusing activity with accomplishment. I was busy, sure, but I wasn't productive. I was in motion, but I wasn't making progress. And there's a massive difference between those two things. A rocking horse is in motion, but it doesn't go anywhere. One day my mentor looked at me and said something that changed everything. He said, Jim, don't mistake movement for achievement. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized I'd been lying to myself. I'd been working on my job, but I hadn't been working on myself. I'd been putting in hours, but I hadn't been putting in the kind of focused, intentional effort that actually creates results. See, being the best at something isn't about working harder than everyone else, although that's part of it. It's about working differently. It's about understanding principles that most people never learn. Here's what society tells you about being the best. It says you need to be naturally gifted. It says you need to be lucky. It says you need to be in the right place at the right time. It says you need connections or money or some special advantage that other people don't have. And all of that is nonsense. Those are the excuses that average people tell themselves to justify staying average. The truth is far simpler and far more challenging. Becoming the best at anything is about making better decisions than other people make, and making those decisions consistently over a long period of time. Let me break this down for you. When someone looks at a master in any field, what they're really seeing is the result of thousands of small daily disciplines that compounded over years. They see the pianist play beautifully, but they don't see the 10,000 hours of practice. They see the successful entrepreneur, but they don't see the failed businesses, the sleepless nights, the hard lessons learned from mistakes. They see the sculpture, but they don't see the chipping away, day after day, removing everything that doesn't look like the final masterpiece. Most people think that talent is what separates the best from the rest. But I've got news for you. Talent is overrated. You know what talent is? Talent is just a head start. That's all it is. It might get you out of the gate faster, but it doesn't guarantee you'll finish the race. I've seen so many talented people waste their gifts because they thought talent was enough. They thought they could coast on natural ability. Meanwhile, I've seen people with average talent become absolute masters in their field because they had something more valuable than talent. They had discipline. They had dedication. They had a philosophy of excellence that guided every single decision they made. Think about it this way. If I take two people and one of them is naturally talented but undisciplined, and the other one has average ability but extraordinary discipline, who do you think wins in the long run? Every single time, I'll bet on the disciplined person. Why? Because talent without discipline is like a car without fuel. It looks impressive, but it's not going anywhere. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Discipline is what turns intention into reality, but here's where most people get it wrong. They think discipline means punishing yourself, depriving yourself, grinding yourself down until there's nothing left. That's not discipline, that's self-destruction. Real discipline is about making choices that your future self will thank you for. It's about understanding that everything you do matters, that every choice you make is either taking you closer to who you want to become or further away from it. There is no neutral ground. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. You're either moving forward or falling behind. Now, let me tell you what I've learned about this concept of being the best. It's not a destination you arrive at one day. It's not like you wake up one morning and suddenly you're the best and now you can relax. That's not how it works. Excellence is a process, not a prize. It's something you do, not something you achieve and then forget about. The day you think you've arrived is the day you start declining. The day you think you know it all is the day you stop growing. I've studied successful people for decades now, and you know what they all have in common? They're never satisfied. Not in a neurotic, unhealthy way, but in a way that keeps them hungry, keeps them curious, keeps them pushing to get better. They don't compare themselves to other people. They compare themselves to who they were yesterday. They ask themselves, am I better today than I was last month? Am I learning? Am I growing? Am I developing new skills? Am I becoming more valuable to the marketplace? That's the measuring stick that matters. See, most people are playing the wrong game entirely. They're trying to be better than their coworkers, better than their neighbors, better than their friends. But that's a game you can never win because there's always going to be someone better than you at something. The real game, the game that actually matters, is becoming the best version of yourself. It's about maximizing your potential. It's about taking whatever raw materials you were given and turning them into something remarkable. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need anyone's permission to do this. You don't need to wait for the right circumstances. You don't need a perfect plan or a guarantee of success. You just need to make a decision. You need to decide that from this day forward, you're going to commit yourself to excellence. Not perfection, because perfection is an illusion, but excellence, which is simply doing the best you can with what you have where you are right now. Let me share something else I've learned. The philosophy of becoming the best isn't complicated. In fact, it's quite simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. There's a huge difference. The principles are simple enough that a child could understand them, but applying them consistently requires more strength and character than most people ever develop. It requires you to do things when you don't feel like doing them. It requires you to keep going when everyone else quits. It requires you to maintain standards when it would be so much easier to let them slip. What I'm going to share with you are 5 fundamental rules. These aren't tips or tricks or life hacks. These are foundational principles that, if you apply them, will transform not just what you do, but who you are. They'll change the way you think, the way you approach problems, the way you spend your time. They'll challenge you. They'll push you out of your comfort zone, but they'll also open up possibilities you never imagined were available to you. These rules aren't about talent. They're not about luck or circumstances. They're about decisions. They're about daily disciplines. They're about building a philosophy of excellence that becomes so deeply ingrained in who you are that you couldn't be mediocre if you tried. And the beautiful thing is, anyone can apply these rules. It doesn't matter where you're starting from. It doesn't matter what mistakes you've made in the past. What matters is what you decide to do from this moment forward. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. What would your life look like if you were the best at what you do? Not the best in the world necessarily, but the best you're capable of being? What would that feel like? What doors would that open? What opportunities would that create? And more importantly, what kind of person would you have to become to achieve that level of excellence? Because here's the secret. The goal isn't really to be the best at something. The goal is to become the kind of person who does what the best people do. Get that philosophy right, and the results will take care of themselves. Now let me give you the first rule, and I promise you this one is going to seem too simple. You're going to hear it and think, that's it? That's the big secret? But stay with me here, because this is where most people go wrong. Rule number 1, master the fundamentals. That's it. Not the advanced techniques, not the secret shortcuts, not the complicated strategies, the fundamentals, the basics, the boring, repetitive, unsexy fundamentals that everyone knows about but almost nobody actually masters. I learned this lesson the hard way. When I started studying success, I wanted the advanced stuff. I wanted the secrets that the top performers knew. I thought the fundamentals were for beginners, and I was ready to move beyond that. But then I started really watching masters in different fields, and you know what I noticed? They were obsessed with the basics. The best basketball players still practice free throws every single day. The best musicians still run through their scales. The best writers still work on sentence structure. The best business people still focus on serving customers and creating value. Here's what I came to understand. Amateurs look for shortcuts. Professionals drill fundamentals. Amateurs want the fancy moves. Professionals want the foundation. You see, when you master the fundamentals, everything else becomes easier. The advanced techniques aren't really that advanced when you've got a rock-solid foundation. But if you try to build advanced skills on a weak foundation, the whole thing collapses. It's like trying to build a skyscraper on sand. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with a very successful businessman years ago. I asked him what made the difference between the people who made it in business and those who didn't. He said, "Jim, the winners do the basics brilliantly. The losers do the basics badly, if they do them at all." Think about that. It's not rocket science. It's not some mysterious formula. The basics work. They've always worked. They'll always work. The question is, are you willing to do them consistently? The problem is, basics are boring. They don't give you that instant gratification. When you practice fundamentals, you don't see dramatic improvements overnight. The progress is slow, incremental, almost invisible day to day. But over time, the compound effect is extraordinary. It's like putting money in the bank. One deposit doesn't change your life. But make small deposits consistently over 20 years and suddenly you're wealthy. The same principle applies to skill development. Most people quit on the fundamentals because they don't see immediate results. They practice something for a week, maybe a month, and when they're not an expert yet, they move on to something else. They jump from one thing to another, always looking for that magic bullet, that one technique that's going to transform everything overnight. But that's not how mastery works. Mastery comes from doing the same basic things over and over again until they become second nature, until you can do them without thinking, until they're woven into the fabric of who you are. I must have read the same basic personal development books 5, 6, 7 times. People would ask me, "Jim, haven't you already read that?" And I'd say, "Yes, but I haven't mastered it yet." See, there's a big difference between knowing something and doing something. There's a huge gap between information and application. The fundamentals need to move from your head to your habits. They need to become automatic. And the only way that happens is through repetition. But here's where it gets interesting. Rule number 1 will take you far, but it won't take you all the way. You need something else. You need fuel for the journey. That brings me to rule number 2. Develop an insatiable curiosity. Listen carefully to this. Mastery of fundamentals alone can make you competent, but curiosity makes you exceptional. Curiosity is what separates the good from the great. It's what keeps you fresh, keeps you learning, keeps you growing, even after you've achieved a level of success. I've met so many people who became good at something and then stopped learning. They reached a certain level of competence and decided that was enough. They stopped reading. They stopped asking questions. They stopped exploring new ideas. And you know what happened? They stagnated. They got comfortable. And comfort is the enemy of growth. The marketplace passed them by because they stopped being curious about how to get better. The best people I've ever known, the real masters in their fields, are the most curious people. They ask questions constantly. They want to know how things work, why things work, what would happen if we tried it differently. They're like children in that way. Children are naturally curious about everything, but somewhere along the way, most adults lose that. They think they have it all figured out. They stop asking why and what if and how could this be better. Let me tell you a story. Early in my career, I made it a point to ask successful people how they got where they were. I wasn't too proud to learn from anyone. I'd talk to janitors and CEOs, teachers and entrepreneurs, old folks and young folks. Everyone had something to teach me if I was curious enough to ask and humble enough to listen. And you know what I learned? Every single person who had achieved something significant had their own unique path, their own lessons, their own insights. My curiosity gave me access to decades of wisdom that I could have never gained on my own. Here's the thing about curiosity. It helps you see opportunities that other people miss. While everyone else is doing things the same old way, curious people are asking, is there a better way? What are we not seeing? What if we tried this instead? That's where innovation comes from. That's where breakthroughs come from. Not from doing what everyone else does, but from being curious enough to question assumptions and explore new possibilities. Curiosity also protects you from failure. How? Because curious people learn from everything. When something goes wrong, curious people ask, what can I learn from this? What does this teach me? How can I use this information to get better? Average people just get discouraged and quit. Curious people turn every setback into a lesson, every failure into feedback. They're constantly extracting value from every experience. And here's something most people don't realize. Curiosity keeps you young. I'm not talking about your physical age. I'm talking about your mental and emotional age. You ever notice how some people seem old at 30 and others seem young at 70? The difference is curiosity. When you stop being curious, you start dying inside. But when you maintain that hunger to learn, to grow, to discover, to improve, you stay vibrant and alive, regardless of how many birthdays you've had. The most valuable skill you can develop is learning how to learn. Because here's the reality. The specific knowledge you have today might be obsolete tomorrow. Technology changes, markets change, economies change. But if you're curious, if you're constantly learning, you can adapt to anything. You become anti-fragile. Change doesn't threaten you, it excites you because it's an opportunity to learn something new, to grow in a new direction, to develop new skills. So let me tie these two rules together for you. You master the fundamentals, and that gives you a solid foundation. But you stay curious, and that foundation keeps expanding, keeps getting stronger, keeps becoming more sophisticated. The fundamentals give you stability. Curiosity gives you growth. The fundamentals make you reliable. Curiosity makes you remarkable. You need both. One without the other is incomplete. Think about it this way. If you only master fundamentals but never stay curious, you become rigid. You get stuck in your ways. You become that person who says, this is how we've always done it. But if you're only curious without mastering fundamentals, you're scattered. You're always chasing the new shiny thing without ever building real competence in anything. But put them together, now you've got something powerful. Now you've got someone who's both solid and flexible, both competent and creative, both reliable and innovative. The question is, are you willing to commit to both? Are you willing to do the boring work of mastering basics while maintaining the childlike wonder of curiosity? Because that combination right there will set you apart from 95% of people in any field. Now we come to rule number 3, and this one is going to challenge you. This is where the rubber meets the road. Rule number 3. Embrace productive discomfort. Not pain for the sake of pain, not suffering for the sake of suffering, but that specific kind of discomfort that tells you you're growing, you're stretching, you're expanding beyond who you used to be. Let me tell you something that most people don't want to hear. Your comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. It's like a warm bed on a cold morning. It feels so good to stay there, but if you stay too long, you miss the whole day. Most people spend their entire lives trying to be comfortable, trying to avoid discomfort, trying to make everything easy and predictable. And then they wonder why their life never changes, why they never achieve anything significant. I remember taking on a speaking engagement early in my career that absolutely terrified me. The audience was bigger than anything I'd done before. The stakes were higher. I was in over my head and I knew it. Every fiber of my being wanted to call and cancel to stay in my comfortable little world where I knew I could handle things. But something inside me said, Jim, this is exactly the kind of challenge you need. So I did it. And was I uncomfortable? Absolutely. Did I make mistakes? You bet. But that one event taught me more about public speaking than a year of comfortable presentations would have. Here's what you need to understand. There are two kinds of discomfort. There's destructive discomfort, which comes from doing stupid things that harm you, from stress that serves no purpose, from pushing yourself in ways that break you down without building anything up. Stay away from that. But then there's productive discomfort, which comes from stretching yourself, from taking on challenges slightly beyond your current abilities, from doing things that scare you but also excite you. That's the discomfort you want to seek out. Think about physical training. When you lift weights, your muscles experience discomfort. That discomfort is actually micro tears in the muscle fiber. Sounds terrible, right? But that's exactly how muscles grow. They tear slightly, they heal, and they come back stronger. Your skills work the same way. Your capabilities work the same way. Your confidence works the same way. You have to stress the system to make it grow. The best performers in any field have learned to reframe discomfort. They don't see it as something to avoid, they see it as information. When they feel uncomfortable, they think, good, this means I'm at my edge. This is where growth happens. While average people run from discomfort, exceptional people run toward it. They understand that discomfort is temporary, but the growth it produces is permanent. But here's the key. You can't just throw yourself into random discomfort and hope for the best. You need structure. You need a framework. That brings me to rule number 4. Build systems, not goals. Now, I know what you're thinking. Everyone talks about setting goals. The whole personal development industry is built around goal setting. But let me tell you what I've learned. Goals are useful for direction, but systems are what get you there. Here's the problem with goals. A goal is something you want to achieve in the future, but what are you doing today? What are you doing this week? What are you doing every single day that's actually moving you toward that goal? Most people set goals and then just hope things work out. They don't have a system. They don't have a daily practice. They rely on motivation, and motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. Systems are different. A system is a set of daily practices that you do regardless of how you feel. It's a routine, a structure, a series of habits that become automatic. When you have a good system, you don't have to think about whether you feel like doing the work. You just do. As it, because that's what you do at this time on this day. The decision has already been made. Let me give you an example. Instead of setting a goal to write a book, create a system where you write 500 words every morning before breakfast. Don't worry about whether those words are good. Don't worry about whether you feel inspired. Just write 500 words. That's your system. Follow that system for a year, and you'll have a book, maybe 2 books. The goal motivated you to start, but the system is what got you to finish. Your daily routine predicts your future. Show me what you do every single day, and I'll show you where you're going to end up. Most people have terrible daily routines and then wonder why their life isn't working out. They leave everything to chance. They wait to feel like doing things. They let their emotions dictate their actions. But successful people, the ones who become the best at what they do, they have systems, they have routines, they have daily disciplines that they follow no matter what. The beautiful thing about systems is that they remove decision fatigue. Every time you have to decide whether to do something, you're using up mental energy. But when you have a system, the decision is already made. You don't debate it. You don't negotiate with yourself. It's just what you do. This frees up your mental energy for the work itself, for creativity, for problem solving, for actual production, rather than just thinking about production. So here's what I want you to understand about these 2 rules working together. Discomfort is easier to sustain when you have a system. When facing uncomfortable challenges becomes part of your routine, it stops being this big, scary thing and becomes just another part of your day. And your system should be designed to keep you in that zone of productive discomfort, constantly pushing you to grow without breaking you. Now let me give you the 5th and final rule, and this one might be the most powerful of all. Rule number 5, surround yourself with excellence. You see, you can do everything else right. You can master the fundamentals, stay curious, embrace discomfort, build great systems. But if you're surrounded by the wrong people, if your environment is pulling you down instead of lifting you up, you're going to struggle. You might even fail. Because here's a truth that took me years to fully understand. You become like the people you spend the most time with. I want you to think about the 5 people you spend the most time with. Think about their attitudes, their habits, their dreams, their work ethic, their standards. Now look at yourself. I'll bet you're the average of those 5 people. That's not an accident. That's not a coincidence. That's how human beings work. We're social creatures. We adapt to our environment. We conform to the standards of the people around us, usually without even realizing it. Early in my career, I was hanging around people who thought small. They had small dreams, small ambitions, small expectations for their lives. And you know what? I was becoming just like them. I was starting to think that their limitations were my limitations. I was accepting their definitions of what was possible. It wasn't until I changed my associations that my life started to change. I started seeking out people who were more successful than me, people who thought bigger than me, people who were going places I wanted to go. And let me tell you, that was uncomfortable at first. When you're around people who are operating at a higher level, you feel inadequate. You feel like you don't belong. You're tempted to go back to your old crowd where you felt comfortable, where you were the smart one, where you weren't being challenged. But that discomfort is exactly what you need. It's the discomfort of growth. It's the tension between who you are and who you're becoming. Here's what happens when you surround yourself with excellence. Your standards automatically rise. Things that used to seem good enough suddenly don't seem good enough anymore. You start noticing the gap between where you are and where you could be. But instead of that being discouraging, it's inspiring because you're seeing proof that it's possible. You're around people who have done what you want to do. The question changes from, is it possible, to how do I do it? Excellence is contagious. So is mediocrity. So is negativity. So is laziness. Whatever you surround yourself with, that's what you're going to catch. If you hang around complainers, you'll start complaining more. If you hang around people who make excuses, you'll start making excuses. But if you hang around people who take responsibility, who solve problems, who see opportunities instead of obstacles, you'll start doing the same thing. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Jim, that sounds harsh. Are you telling me to abandon my friends? Are you saying I should cut people out of my life? Let me be clear about something. I'm not telling you to be cruel or cold-hearted, but I am telling you that you have to make a choice. You have to decide what's more important, being comfortable with people who are going nowhere or being uncomfortable while you grow into the person you're meant to become. Sometimes you outgrow relationships. That's not a bad thing. That's life. The people who were right for you at one stage might not be right for you at the next stage, and that's okay. You can love people from a distance. You can wish them well, but you don't have to let them hold you back. Your life is too important. Your dreams are too valuable. Your potential is too significant to waste it trying to fit in with people who don't want what you want. Here's another thing about surrounding yourself with excellence. It works both ways. You need to be around people who are ahead of you, people you can learn from. But you also need to be around people who are coming up behind you, people you can teach. Being a mentor to someone else forces you to clarify your own thinking. It reinforces what you've learned. It keeps you accountable because now someone is watching you, learning from your example. The best environments are the ones where everyone is pushing everyone else to be better, where there's healthy competition but also genuine support, where people celebrate each other's wins instead of being jealous, where the attitude is, if he can do it, I can do it too. And if I figure something out, I'm going to share it so we all get better together. That's the kind of environment that produces extraordinary results. Now let me bring all 5 of these rules together for you because they're not meant to work in isolation. They're meant to work as a system. You master the fundamentals, which gives you competence. You stay curious, which keeps you growing. You embrace discomfort, which expands your capabilities. You build systems, which make your growth sustainable. And you surround yourself with excellence, which accelerates everything else. See how they all connect? The fundamentals give you something to build on. Curiosity helps you discover better fundamentals and new approaches. Discomfort is how you push beyond what you already know. Systems make sure you're doing all of this consistently. And your environment either supports all of this or undermines it. Get all 5 working together, and you create a compound effect that's absolutely unstoppable. But here's what you need to understand about timing. Becoming the best at anything isn't a 6-month project. It's not even a 1-year project. We're talking about years of consistent effort. We're talking about making these rules a permanent part of who you are. Most people quit too soon. They try something for a few weeks or a few months, don't see dramatic results, and move on to something else. They're always starting over, always looking for the next thing, never sticking with anything long enough to actually master it. The best people I know, they picked something and stayed with it. Year after year, they kept drilling the fundamentals, they kept learning, they kept pushing through discomfort. They kept showing up, they kept improving their systems, they kept raising the quality of their associations. And after 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, they became masters. Not because they were more talented than everyone else, but because they were more persistent. Because they understood that small daily disciplines repeated over time create extraordinary results. So here's my question for you. Are you willing to commit, not just for this week or this month, but for the long haul? Are you willing to make these 5 rules a permanent part of your philosophy? Because if you are, if you really commit to this, your life is going to change in ways you can't even imagine right now.